I'm John McLaughlin. Our guest is Congressman James Florio, whose South Jersey district includes Gloucester County and part of Camden County. He is one of the few remaining undeclareds, which means he has yet to officially say he's a candidate for the Democratic nomination for governor. There's a massive field of candidates in both parties this year, and what we've been trying to do on this show is to get them all on, eventually, in some sort of categorized fashion. Thus, Kenneth Gibson, Lawrence Kramer, and Thomas Smith, all mayors of big cities, were here in a joint appearance a few weeks ago. We tried over a 2-month period to persuade Robert Roe, Mr. Florio's colleague in the House, to join him in this appearance. But the answer was A, he had a wedding to go to, and B, even if he didn't, he wouldn't share the camera time with Mr. Florio until Mr. Florio makes himself an honest man by confessing he is indeed in the mad dash for Morven. We'll be talking to Congressman Florio in a few minutes. But first, a little conversation about Bob Roe with our two trusty political savants, reporter Joe Sullivan and public affairs consultant Alan Marcus. Gentlemen. Joe, Bob Roe finished second in the last gubernatorial primary and finished pretty well. Yeah, he won his home county of Passaic by 10-1. He lost Bergen County to Governor Byrne by only 800 votes. I think he won Sussex. He did okay in Union and Middlesex. Does this automatically make him the front runner this time?
Well, you know, the game hasn't really started to see what's shaking out. And the fella, as you said last time up in the last game, he got a few good hits. So, you know, when he gets to the plate, you have to watch him. And I think that they have a poll that they claim shows he's still holding on to 80% of the support he had in the last election. If that's true, I would say that he has to be considered the front runner. I don't know if it's true.
That's a big leg up.
That certainly is.
Well, one of the things he has to do, though, Joe, is he has to bring his vote out in Passaic again, keep it at that high level, do well in Middlesex, do well where he's done before, and he still has to find another 50 or 60,000 votes because that's what he fell short the last time.
Well, I don't think they're going to need as many this time as they did last time.
Shouldn't. Maybe 18% will win, I would think, huh?
Yeah, I think if he gets to 139, that might be enough to win.
Okay, Alan, Bob Roe raised $1,200,000 last time, a prodigious feat. He says he can do that again this time and without benefit of public financing. What's the point in him not taking public money? What's the strategy?
I don't understand it, John. I think the congressman probably and his advisors think that it's a good issue to say we didn't raid the Treasury, we didn't take public money. If that's an issue, Bob Roe's a very smart man. To raise $1,200,000 with contributions of $800 or less is an incredible feat, and if he pulls it off, he'll bear watching.
One thing he could do, the last reporting requirement is 7 days before the election. He says he's going to abide by the limit of $1,050,000 or whatever it is. He could go out and raise $500,000 7 days before the election, spend it, and nobody would ever know.
And worry about it in the general election if it's an issue. Moreover, John, I think what they could do, and what a lot of people are watching for, is that supporters, such as Peter Levine, who gave Bob Roe $250,000 in 1977, could contribute huge sums of money to the party line organization in Passaic County, as an example, to bring the vote out for the organization. Or they could do that in Middlesex or in Monmouth County, give the county leader in Monmouth $100,000 to bring the vote out. That's how you get around it.
Well, he hopes that it will become an issue. I think his pitches, you know, at a time when they're cutting back on food stamps and everything else, this is no time to be, you know, as you say, raiding, or somebody said, raiding the Treasury.
Joe, Bob Roe's gig, I mean, it's always been his thing, is public sector jobs, even going back to the days when he was a state commissioner of conservation and economic development. But that kind of thing is out of style now, the government setting up programs for people to become employed.
Well, he can't announce any new jobs, but I think he still has a lot of goodwill out there that he's engendered, I guess, by the programs that he's had in the past. He's also been appointed to get himself into the water situation by being appointed to a subcommittee on that. And he
gave up a committee chairmanship for that job, right?
Yeah, he wanted to be in that position if the drought became, now the drought is sort of getting on the back burner, but if there was a threat to shut down industry, I think he wanted to be in a position to try and do something about that. And
are you suggesting again, he was not praying for rain?
I don't know.
Alan, it's pretty clear to a lot of people, I think, that the one guy that Brendan Byrne doesn't want to see succeed him, the one guy he doesn't want to turn over the great seal of the state of New Jersey to, is Bob Roe, mainly because he's afraid that Roe would dismantle all the environmental programs he's put together, especially the Pinelands package. How do you feel about that? What do you think?
Well, I'm a neutral on that. I think that Brendan Byrne feels quite strongly about it. The governor and his aides probably are looking at this election more in terms of who can beat Bob Roe and would therefore carry out the Byrne mandates through another 4 years than anything else. That's why there's so much competition right now between Merlino and Degnan for the Byrne vote, and Byrne's waiting to see which of those candidates, or Jim Florio or someone else in the race, will be able to take Bob Roe on head-to-head and make it a two-man race and beat him.
Now, we're talking about State Senator Joe Merlino.
I'm sorry, State Senator Joe Merlino, Congressman Florio, former Attorney General John Degnan, who last week formally declared his candidacy.
And you're saying that Merlino ranks second in Byrne's affections, and he may go there. Congressman Florio third, perhaps?
I don't think that anybody ranks in Byrne's affections. I think Byrne has deep affection for everybody in this race except for Bob Roe.
Including several Republicans.
Well, the only candidate for governor who's had his arm put around him by Governor Byrne so far is Dick McGlynn, and he's a Republican.
Joe, Bob Roe's got a fairly good head start in Hudson County because he's got the support of Mayor Dennis Collins of Bayonne. Now, if Mayor Thomas Smith of Jersey City begins to stumble or falter, if his thing begins to come apart, is Roe in good shape to pick up the pieces?
Oh, I think he's probably in the best shape, but I don't really think at this point that I think that Tommy's going to go all the way. But what's happening is that Denny Collins has been named his statewide campaign director, and he's really going to, do what he can to help Roe, certainly in Bayonne and in the rest of Hudson County. The Wally Shield organization, State Senator Shield, is supporting Smith, putting up the son of former Mayor Francis Fitzpatrick of Bayonne for the state assembly, and they're going to campaign. He's going to campaign as a Smith supporter, and they hope to hold Roe even in Bayonne, and then give Tommy a plurality in the rest of the county. But Roe should do well in Hudson, and I think he's got strength in a number of counties. He's been organizing for a long time.
Joe and Alan, thanks a lot. We trusted Congressman Roe had a good time at the wedding. We'll be back in a minute for a chat with Congressman Florio. Our guest is Congressman James Florio, the three-term congressman from New Jersey's 1st District. He's chairman of the House Subcommittee on Transportation, Commerce, and Tourism, and he's active on committees dealing with the elderly and national parks. Congressman, thanks for being here. Congressman, legislators propose and governors decide. What are you going to decide that you are a candidate for governor?
Well, I'm going through the process of evaluating as to whether I can be of more value in Washington or Trenton, and we'll make some decisions pretty soon, and you'll be the first to know.
Really? Me, myself? Gee, that's great. That's terrific. Have you given any thought to passing this thing up and running for the United States Senate next year for Senator Williams' seat?
Well, Senator Williams has done a very good job. Legislatively, I agree with the accomplishments he's achieved. I am aware of the fact that there are charges that are leveled, but I think it's premature for anyone to make any decision that there's even going to be a spot open.
So it's never entered your mind?
No.
Okay. 1 year at a time then, huh?
That's right.
You're involved in Washington as the main defender of 3 programs extremely vital to New Jersey. And the administration wants to make savage cuts in the Amtrak and Conrail appropriations. There's some suspicion that the administration won't spend the $1.6 billion for the toxic waste Superfund cleanup, and also that President Reagan won't make good on President Carter's commitment to spend federal money for the Pinelands Preservation Package. Now, those are going to be ongoing battles through the spring, I would think. If you do decide to run, how are you going to be down in Washington fighting these fights and also campaigning up here at the same time?
Well, I'm working right now in a very aggressive way to attempt to deal with all of those problems, including the Veterans Hospital in South Jersey, which is a very important project as well for New Jersey and the regional economy. And I'm convinced that the process that we have now being formulated in Washington will allow the president to do some of the things that he wants to do. I mean, there's legitimately, I think, a conservative, notwithstanding the fact the Democratic Party is in control of the House, there's a conservative coalition that supports much of what the president is trying to do. And I'm going to be doing what I can to make sure that those things are not done, because as you point out, they're very important to New Jersey.
But the question was, how can you do that in Washington and campaign up here at the same time? And both require a great deal of time.
Well, essentially, put your finger on the factors that are causing me to evaluate what it is I'm going to do. That's a very important consideration, and that's one of the major things that's a factor in the evaluation.
Well, can you do both?
Well, that's why I'm evaluating it.
Your political base is South Jersey, and you're sort of recognized as South Jersey's political leader now. If you do decide to run for governor, how do you plan to broaden your base here in Central Jersey and in North Jersey?
Since I haven't made the decision yet, I haven't really come to a point with regard to strategy, and we'll make those kinds of decisions when we get to that point. I suppose as you know, I ran 4 years ago and got a good degree of support out of the southern half of the state and was a virtual non-entity in the northern half of the state. I suspect that things have changed a bit over the past 4 years, so that as a result of a little bit more recognition, it might not be quite as difficult to get some support in other portions of the state.
Have you talked at all the people in North Jersey about your candidacy?
Like
Your potential candidacy? Political leaders?
Well, I'm someone even in the southern portion of the state have always waged campaigns sort of doing a grassroots thing and feel that the traditional political structures aren't what they used to be. I don't think we'll ever get to the point again where we have 4 or 5 people sitting down in the room and deciding who the governor is. So that if I were to become a candidate and if I were to campaign, I'd more or less campaign the same way that I've campaigned for Congress in the southern portion of the state, which is to have a sort of a massive get out the vote effort and then attempt to communicate with people in very direct ways.
Yeah, but that takes people. I mean, you've got to know people and have people behind you and have people organized in these various areas. It takes a lot of work, a lot of organization, a lot of time.
One of the things that's happened over the last couple of years is there have been a sort of a natural constituency for some of the programs that I've been involved with. You mentioned the Superfund. A lot of people are very concerned about the inappropriate disposal of toxic materials, and people have followed what I've tried to do, and I suspect there are some people that are enthused about what I've tried to do.
Congressman, you're a street kid from Brooklyn, high school dropout. You joined the Navy, got your equivalency degree, then went on to Trenton State College. You graduated from there. You were a night watchman for a while when you went to law school at Rutgers.
I'm impressed with your research.
Your love of politics, it began in college. I understand that the first election you ever won was for a class presidency at Trenton State. And you did that, it occurred to you, you said, that the biggest group in any state college was the homely girls group. And if you could go out to the various sororities and use your charm and on these students, that it would work for you. And so it did. You won the election. Is that true?
Well, I believe in going out and talking to all of one's constituents and trying to be persuasive and trying to be persuasive. I've conducted my campaigns since that election in different ways, but essentially always with the same approach, trying to talk to people and trying to be persuasive.
Was that a yes?
That was that I've conducted my campaigns in the way that I tried to conduct them.
That's what I thought. Last week we had a gentleman named Howard Vanderkloot on the show here, and he was the national chairman of Veterans for Reagan. He was very concerned about this hospital in Camden, $68 million VA hospital. And he said, and he was very upset with Reagan for canceling the project. He said, in his view, it's absolutely dead.
Well, I don't agree with that. We just had a very important meeting in Washington this week with the leading VA officials who were involved with the project. And the thing that came out of the meeting that I thought was startling was the revelation by these officials that they had no advance notice by OMB, and it's Mr. Stockman who really made the decision, of the fact that this was going to be rescinded. And we're talking about taking back money that's already been appropriated. Land has been cleared, the whole project's ready to go, and the lead governmental agency which is involved and which still supports the project, which is ironic, as of this day, was not notified. That tells me that decisions that were made in that area, and I suspect in some other areas as a result of my committee deliberations, are made not on the basis of any policy justification, that are made by somebody just drawing lines through numbers and then going back and trying to rationalize as to why one did it.
Yeah, but it sort of tells me that that decision was made to stick.
Well, it may have been made by the people who made it, but that decision is a proposal. This is a bit different than just a budget decision. This is something that it entails a rescission. That is, you have to go back to the Congress and get them to undo what they've already done. The Congress has authorized the money, appropriated the money, Architects have been hired, land has been cleared. A lot of people in the state even have relied upon that commitment. Now you've got to come back to the Congress and get them to rescind, that is, take back $68 million after you've already got $7 million into the project. That's not going to be as easy as possible.
Well,
I think
the administration doesn't have to spend the money.
Oh, they do. I mean, they have to spend that money until they get rescission. To not spend it is called impoundment. That's illegal. So the legislature has to approve that change of plans.
Suppose worse comes to worse and the hospital isn't built. Would you then consider changing your opposition to the state prison that the Governor Byrne proposed for Camden?
No, they're not related at all. The proposal that was made for the Camden prison facility was to put a 14-acre medium security state prison in the middle of the city of Camden, which was a crazy proposal. It just really made no sense whatsoever. And on the basis of the merits, we opposed it. It had nothing to do with the hospital site.
And there's no chance you'll ever change your mind on that?
Well, I just think that if you're going to talk about that type of facility, you should not be talking about it in the middle of an urban area. You've only got 2 or 3 parcels of land that could be used. One is the waterfront parcel. Camden has enough problems that if it starts using its only resource, the waterfront land, for a state prison, I'm just not sure that that's really smart.
And you'd be willing to give up the jobs that would go along with the prison?
Well, the jobs, are you talking about the construction jobs for the construction of a state prison?
Well, the prisons always surround themselves with service retail establishments.
I would much
and that
rather
sort of
see
thing.
Camden's waterfront developed in a more productive way for jobs than a state prison.
Congressman, in the fall of 1979, the FBI tried to fish you up in the Abscam net. FBI operative met with you and offered you $25,000 if you would meet with some Arabs, some phony Arabs, and make friends. And you thought it over, and you talked to Congressman Hughes about it, and you decided not to go. What possessed you to even think over an offer like that, and why didn't you report that to the Justice Department?
Well, first of all, your facts are incorrect, but I'll be happy to try to correct them.
Sure.
An individual contacted me in a 5-minute meeting and asked if I would have an interest in meeting some Arab clients or friends who were very generous and thought nothing of $25,000 as tokens of appreciation. There wasn't any offer, there wasn't any solicitation, any quid pro quo. The meeting was 5 minutes. I indicated that I didn't have any interest. I later talked to Congressman Hughes, inquiring about whether he had had the same type of offer. The man apparently had made an appointment to go see Congressman Hughes, and the meeting never took place. So that's the factual basis.
Well, in the absence of the quid pro quo, a suggestion that you would be paid $25,000 simply by
that's not correct.
given $25,000.
That's not even correct as
All right.
well. What was suggested was that meeting people who were very generous might be of some advantage to them, and that these people were generous to their friends. One doesn't have to be a great logical genius to figure out what it was talked about, but nothing was ever stated in any sort of a direct way as to inappropriate behavior.
I'm not sure I follow that. Who did you think that the $25,000 would be destined for?
Well, it wasn't. The figure was offered as an indication of the extent of apparently the wealth of these people, that to them $25,000 was nothing, and that these people were inclined to be generous to their friends. How would you like to come see them?
And be a friend.
And perhaps be a friend.
And doesn't it follow then that such a course of behavior might be worth $25,000?
Well, if you happen to follow that course of behavior, it is, I suppose, but I wasn't in the mood to even go and meet the people.
Well, the reason I'm asking this is, despite the absence of the quid pro quo, there's such a thing in the bribery statute called a gratuity, wherein a public official, can't take money simply by virtue of holding his office. And it seems to me that this might have been what was offered here.
Well, I think on the basis of the facts that I just indicated to you, that wasn't the case.
Okay. Do you resent the fact that the FBI sought you out and tried to lure you in?
There's a serious question as to what it was that transpired. I am of the opinion now, and I'm not sure I was when this all broke, that the FBI probably didn't send the fellow to see me or apparently other individuals that he saw, that he was sort of an independent entrepreneur and on his own went and saw people and then reported back whom it was that he thought would follow up and who it was that would meet. And that's my best opinion as to what it is. But I've inquired and have been informed that he was not directed by anyone in authority to come see me or anybody else, that he was more or less on his own.
He was just sort of given carte blanche to go out and find whoever he could, huh?
That's the best of my information.
You view that as appropriate behavior for
an
investigation?
individual?
No, for an investigation.
Well, apparently, and as I say, it's just speculation. Apparently, the individual just made offers that he thought he could bring to these people, whom he thought, apparently, were legitimate Arabs. He could bring some people who they might have an interest in talking to. I didn't have an interest in talking to anyone.
Yeah, but it seems to me I asked you, do you think that's an appropriate way for the FBI to conduct an investigation,
Well,
to
what I'm
allow a guy to
suggesting
go out
you
and do
is-
this?
Well, what I'm suggesting to you is I don't know for a fact that they allowed anyone as opposed to someone voluntarily saying to whom he thought were Arabs, I have some friends that I would like to bring in. So your hypothetical is that perhaps he was directed to go see someone. If that was the case, that's totally reprehensible and inappropriate.
Okay, you said once that a federal budget deficit is not necessarily a bad thing. If you run for governor and if you win, you inherit a constitutional mandate to balance the state budget. And the next governor is going to have some real problems ahead,
Yes.
especially with the escalation of pension costs. They're going to go up by hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 5 or 6 years because they're fixed items in the budget that nobody can do anything about. Governor Byrne has proposed that we ought to take a look at either a statewide real estate tax or changing the present income tax structure from a flat base rate to a progressive rate so as to generate more money. How do you feel about that kind of approach to taxation?
Well, I think the next governor, whomever it is going to have to really look at the total tax picture in the state and to try to come up with a comprehensive overhaul of our whole total tax system. I suspect the argument about having a more progressive income tax is something that any governor is going to have to look at and probably approve. I think there is something inherently inappropriate about having one rate. The federal government has adopted that concept. One rate for someone that makes $20,000 and the same rate from someone who makes $200,000. So I'm not offended by the idea of a higher degree of progressivity, but I think we really shouldn't just deal with the one portion of our total tax picture. We have to deal with a total tax revision.
Well, you voted against this income tax when you were in the legislature.
Not this legislature, this tax.
Well,
I wasn't in the legislature.
You voted against an income tax.
That's correct.
Was that the reason? Because it wasn't progressive?
Well, there were a lot of reasons at one particular time. Actually, Governor Cahill had a proposal that I voted against that I didn't think yielded enough to the cities. I represented a legislative district that was primarily dominated by the city of Camden. That proposal did not yield what I thought was an appropriate share of the revenues to the city of Camden.
Just a couple of questions on some issues. How do you feel about Senator Merlino's bill to ban the sale of handguns in this state?
Well, I haven't seen the actual legislation, but from the newspaper versions, and sometimes I read what I see in the newspapers and believe it. It seems to be somewhat confiscatory, and he seems to be talking about literally confiscating handguns. I'm not sure that that's the appropriate way to deal with the problem. The problem, of course, is the abuse of handguns. I support what the governor has done, which is to sign legislation providing for mandatory sentences for those who do abuse guns. New Jersey, as I understand it, has a fairly stiff regulatory system for handgun and all gun control.
So you think that what Senator Merlino was proposing goes too far?
Well, as I understand it, it appears to go too far, yes.
How about the death penalty?
Well, I would support a death penalty piece of legislation if, in fact, it was drawn in a sufficiently narrow way so as to deal with those offenses that just are inexcusable. Contract killings, someone puts a bomb in a crowded bus station. I think that's the type of offense that I would be in a position to support.
But only in a very narrow
Yes.
way. Do you think that such a death penalty would have any impact at all on the crime rate?
Oh, I think so. I think it would. There's deterrent value in that type of thing.
Well, generally, how do you feel about combating crime and crime control? Which All the polls show that this is the big issue on people's minds this year.
Well, I've been very involved in this in the sense that I was a big proponent of a program, LEAA, the Law Enforcement Assistance Program, and that one of the things that came out of that was some demonstration projects that dealt with, and Houston was a place where they tried this out, a career criminals program. It is strange to find out that there's a relatively small number of people who are responsible for most occasions of violent crime. If you can target in on those people, and that's what this program did, we're utilizing the best prosecutors, the best investigators, defining these repeat offenders, putting them on the fast track of the criminal justice system, disposing of their cases in a rapid way, and if appropriately, putting them behind bars. There's a noticeable impact, and I'm very enthused about that concept being applied to the total criminal justice system in the state, and perhaps ultimately across the nation.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning for a second. What do you think you can do to stop these very massive cuts in rail transportation, specifically?
Well, I think what we can do is try to insert an element of rationality in the whole process. We have had people from the Department of Transportation before my committee, and there is no concept of the impact to come before, as people from the administration have come before my committee, and say they're advocating the total elimination over the next 3 years of any federal assistance for operating expenses is just irresponsible. And when I put the question to them, you've got 500,000 people a day in the Northeast who use the commuter rail systems. How are they going to get to work if you take out of that whole computation the federal assistance? The response was either you increase the fares, and that entails increases of the magnitude of 400% and 500%, which is outrageous, which is not doable, or you go to the local sources for supplementary monies. And my response, of course, is if you're going to Texas or to Alaska where they have billions of dollars of surplus, that's fine. But New Jersey doesn't have that money. The response to that was put people back in automobiles.
Okay, thanks a lot. We're almost out of time. Our guest has been Congressman James Florio, who may or may not be a Democratic candidate for governor. Don't bet a lot of money that he's not.